Hey everyone, before we start today's video, I just wanted to take a short while to talk about chilling. Now, I know I've talked about chilling a lot, but I just wanted to give another reminder if you haven't heard about it yet. Chilling is the home for horror. It's the go-to horror community with over 700 stories, ranging from creepypastas to true crime and all that good stuff. And it's all ad-free. New content is constantly being added, along with new narrators reading your favorite stories. One of my favorite features from Chilling is their one-of-a-kind background ambient menu, which lets you choose the ambience that is perfect for you. Ambiences are also now available completely independent for when you really want to kick back and just chill out. And don't forget that you can now download your favorite stories from Chilling and use them when you're on the go for offline listening. If you're interested in checking out Chilling, give it a try and sign up for free using their trial and see what it has to offer. If you plan to continue, it's only $2.99 a month after that. And Chilling is also holding another amazing giveaway. This time it's for an Xbox bundle, which includes an additional wireless controller, Resident Evil Village, and Elden Ring. Be sure to check it out. The winner will be announced on March 31st. And the details to enter will be linked below in the description. Thanks again to Chilling for being great. This story was shared with me by my grandfather, who was a part of a team of scientists researching the giant statues on Easter Island. This transpired in the first half of the 20th century. I was the youngest member of our 10-person team, and was given most of the grunt work, as everyone regarded me as their inferior, being the new guy. I didn't mind doing the work, as I was looking forward to working with a bunch of professionals. I was fresh out of college, and this was my first real job in the field. The boat ride to the island was a torture for me, as I spent most of the journey there vomiting due to seasickness. As you can expect, most of the crew were laughing at me due to my head hanging over the side of the boat every few hours. The rest of our team were unaffected by the journey, which furthered my embarrassment. It was a long and arduous journey as the island is so remote. It is over 2,000 kilometers from the nearest other island. I had never felt such relief as the moment that I finally set foot on land again. The other older team members began barking orders at me, and I rushed around grabbing the equipment off the boat. The captain told us that he would be back in a month's time, and if we had any problems, then unfortunately we were on our own. I felt a weird sense of foreboding as I watched the boat disappear off into the distance. The others stood alongside me for a few moments, and I'm not sure if they were thinking the same thing that I was. We spent the next few hours setting up our camp and organizing all our supplies. The person leading our group was called Andrew, and he was continuously glaring at me as I moved from one task to another. We eventually had everything set up, and Andrew told us all to go to sleep early, as we had a long day ahead of us tomorrow. I had the best night's sleep in ages, and I wasn't being awoken by the rocking of the waves like I was on the ship. I was awoken the next morning by sounds of movement outside my tent. I quickly got dressed and started helping the others with breakfast. We devoured our food and then we prepared to head out. Unsurprisingly, I was given the bulk of the stuff to carry, as Andrew didn't want to overburden the others. We reached the first giant statue and stood awestruck in front of it. The head towered over us, and it made me feel so insignificant. Andrew snapped his fingers at us, and we were dragged from our reverie. We all began setting up our equipment so that we could study this giant head and hopefully learn a bit more about it. I was instructed by Andrew to use a hammer to smash a piece off as he wanted some samples. I tried to argue that we shouldn't damage them, but he began scolding me and I was ordered to do it, otherwise I wouldn't be paid. I reluctantly walked up to the head and tried to look for a spot that I could easily break off. I placed my hand against the side and was surprised at how warm it felt. I found a piece that had been previously damaged, and I smashed the hammer against it. The entire statue began to shake, and I took a few steps back in shock. The eyes of the statue seemed to be glaring at me, and I had never felt so terrified. I rushed over to the others and explained what had just happened, and they followed me to the statue. None of them spotted anything out of the ordinary, and Andrew slapped me across the face and told me to stop being a nuisance. He picked up a piece that I had broken off and led the others back to where they had their equipment set up. I spent the rest of the day helping the others, but kept a constant, wary eye on the statue. We left our equipment behind at the end of the day when we were headed back to camp, as there was no point in charting it back and forth. That night, I got up to go to the bathroom and went to a short distance from the camp. I felt something staring at me, and I looked around thinking that it was another one of the team members nearby. My blood went cold as I saw the statue only a short distance away. I began to back up, but it didn't move. I awoke all the others and brought them over to where I had seen it. They searched around, but they couldn't find anything. They gave me sympathetic looks and told me that it was just a nightmare. I slept badly that night, as I kept expecting a giant shadow to appear hovering over my tent. The next morning, we made the long walk back to where we had left our equipment. I was lagging behind the others, as I didn't want to be anywhere near that bloody statue. I heard annoyed shouting ahead of me, and rushed forward to see what was going on. I stopped in shock as I saw that all of our equipment lying was smashed and spread all over the ground. Everything was beyond salvaging, and they were so utterly broken. I moved towards the statue from yesterday, and I know that it sounds crazy, but it had moved. It had been facing away from the camp yesterday, but now it was looking towards our destroyed equipment. 2 other statues were also in the distance, but none had been nearby when we were here yesterday. I pointed this out to Andrew, but he was too annoyed about the destroyed equipment to even pay attention. Andrew decided to move our camp to beside the statue, as it at least that way we could have our equipment beside us at all times. I considered telling Andrew this was a terrible idea, but I knew that he would never listen to me anyway. The following morning, I was awoken by screams from one of the group members. I rushed outside to find everyone standing around something on the ground. I made my way over and almost fainted as I gazed down at the bloody remains. It looked like whoever it was had been crushed, as their body had been liquefied. We did a quick head count and realized that it was Luke who was the second in command. The others began urging Andrew that we needed to leave, but he ignored them and began ordering everyone to get to work. We knew that we had no choice but to do as he said, as we were trapped here until the boat returned. We considered going to the locals for help, but we were worried that they might have been responsible for what had happened. I was tasked with gathering up Luke's remains so that we could properly bury him. I ended up having to use a shovel and a bucket as there were no solid pieces left of his body. Even his bones had been broken beyond recognition. I was looking around me as I did this, as more statues had appeared overnight. There was almost a dozen of them watching us now. I could see that the others had noticed the new statues as well, as they kept shooting terrified glances towards them. Andrew, for some reason, seemed oblivious to them, as he was concentrating on getting his research completed. Every morning, we woke up to find more and more statues appearing around our camp. They were surrounding us. 3 more of our team were found dead. Their bodies had been crushed, but their heads had been left intact. Their faces had died with expressions of pure terror etched across them. I was forced to use the shovel to separate their heads, as I needed to collect the remains. I ended up dumping them at the edge of camp, as there was no point in burying them anymore. I didn't know what to do, so I began discussing with the remaining crew about grabbing what was left of our supplies and heading somewhere different, anywhere away from these statues. Obviously, Andrew told me that I was just being a nuisance again, and that the dead crew members had all passed of natural causes. I looked into his face, and I came to the sickening realization that he had lost his freaking mind. There was no doubt about it. The next morning, I woke up to an eerily silent camp. I made my way out of my tent. The statues had encircled the camp almost completely, and they were all gazing inwards towards me, looming over me. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned to see Andrew preparing to start work on his equipment. I made my way over towards them and stopped as I saw the remains of the others. Their bodies had been crushed much like before, and it looked like something had shoved them into the ground, as they were almost a meter down. I approached Andrew and reminded him that the boat was coming tomorrow and that we needed to leave. I took a step back when he turned around and gazed into his empty eye sockets. He smiled at me and told me that he couldn't leave until he had finished his work. I was really freaking out by this point, so I said forget him. I decided to just grab my stuff and leave. It took me almost an hour to get out of the camp, as these statues were arrayed so tightly around us. I found a small gap and I began to slip through. I began to panic as these statues slowly moved and started to crush me, closing in on my body. Luckily, I managed to squeeze my way out, but the skin had been ripped off my body in numerous places. I made my way down the hill and gazed back for a moment to see that the statues had now turned and they were all facing me. I couldn't see any sign of Andrew, but knew that they would deal with him like they had for the rest of our camp. I started to weep in happiness the next morning as I saw the boat approaching. The captain greeted me and asked if anyone else was coming. He didn't seem surprised when I explained that I was the only one left alive. He began giving orders quickly to his crew, while giving fearful glances towards the island. We were quickly underway, as it was clear the crew wanted to leave as soon as possible. I stood on the back of the ship and watched the island slowly disappear into the distance. I could see hundreds of the statues lining the beaches and looking back at me. I'm not sure if they let me leave or if I had somehow managed to escape. All I know is that I will never trust another statue as long as I live.